You hear me now, John?
Yes, sir. Is everything working okay?
No, it's not. I wish you would have been on the thing last week. I had to do it all by phone. It's not giving me any access. Here it goes. Start my video. This thing, I'm gonna press something. I may run away.
I see you.
Sorry guys. You have to look at me. Here I am.
I'm glad it got worked out.
Well, I hope it stays. If not, I'm gonna call you on the phone and do it on the phone.
Okay.
That's what I had to do last week.
It's easier when I'm here. I can help a little bit more.
Yeah. But I got farther today than I did all last week, so that's an accomplishment.
It's because that computer knows that it better behave when I'm around. That's why.
That's right. Hey, when's the Christmas party?
Next
Or is
Friday?
it on?
It's Thursday, the 16th at Tommy Knockers at 5 o'clock, 5 to 7.
5 to 7. Okay.
Are you coming?
Well, I'm gonna try. I don't want to tell you I'm gonna be there. I might not be able to make it, but I'm gonna certainly try.
Okay.
I have to come from Lakewood, and I don't think I'll be leaving there till 5. So we'll see. But does that screw up your count by not being able to say yay or nay?
Not so much. Should I just put you down for 1 then, Art, or 2 tentatively, or?
Yeah, no. I'll be with my wife. She goes everywhere I go.
Okay.
Oh, just about.
Okay.
Not everywhere.
I'll put you down for 2 then. And if
All
it
right,
changes,
thank
you
you.
can just tell me later. That's great. Thank
Okay,
you.
great.
Okay,
Okay, thanks.
sure thing.
Are you going to share what you're eating with us there, Mr. Chuck?
Yeah, I brought enough to share.
There you go.
If you're gonna have an irregular schedule, you got to eat right.
That's
I
about
hear you.
It's right there.
Wonder, can I RSVP for the Christmas party with you?
Yes, please.
There'll be 2 of us.
Perfect. That's great. Thank you.
And hey, thank you for the mask mandate info.
Oh, you're welcome. Yeah, it just makes it easier to find, I think, if it's close up in email or just easier access, I think, just for
Sure.
questions and such things.
Hello, Tim.
Hi, Andy. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Perfect.
How you doing, Andy, Mr. Mayor? You all
Doing
guys,
well.
everybody
Thank you,
okay?
sir.
Doing good. I've been trying to call you, Art.
Really?
Yeah, I called you a couple of times at the house, and then you
You
got
didn't
me.
leave a message, did you?
No, I didn't leave a message. I'll give you a quick shout after. I'll give you a quick shout after the meeting, real quick.
Okay.
Something I want to fill you in on.
Why don't you take down my cell number? That would be
Andy,
the best.
Andy got it to me. Let me make sure. I'm not going to blurt it out.
That's okay. I don't care.
Huh?
I don't care who calls me.
Let's see. My 814-355-3562.
No, that's the one from Pennsylvania. It's about 14 years old.
Well, no wonder you didn't pick up.
No, yeah. So let me give it to you. I don't care who hears it. It's
Okay, go for it.
720-412-2585. I hope the ladies wrote it down. That's what really counts. How's that fire? Is it more under control than last night?
It is. Yeah, they gave an update. I think that they was hoping to have it 100% contained by this evening. So I think they got a good enough weather. The wind died down, which was huge. That's what they were fighting. Well, they couldn't even fight it. They weren't even going to go in. They just set a perimeter and just kind of let it burn. And when the winds died down, and they finally were offered some air strike for it, but they said that they didn't feel they needed it at that point. It was already done. So
Super. Yeah, those guys, they brave men and women.
yes. Had the news up here. There's a couple of news stations up here. They set up the incident command over here at Station 2. So we had some folks up here from all different types of agencies too.
Oh, wow.
All right, we're going to give it a couple more minutes. Hopefully everybody is going to attend our last work session of the year.
Is next Monday our last regular scheduled meeting?
Yes, Arthur, it is. That's the last regular meeting of the year.
So
We
what, March 2nd or something like that? Is that when we resume?
March 2nd. Whoa, wait a minute.
I'm just teasing.
There's Jim. Hey, Jim. Let's see.
Jim.
Did Scott say he wasn't going to be here tonight, Andy?
Scott was uncertain. He is out of
Because
town,
he's out of town on vacation, right?
and he was going to try to join, but I gathered that if he's not here when we're ready to go, we should probably get started.
Okay, let's get started. Are we live? Oh, we are live. All right, welcome, Council Tim, Lorraine. Good to see you. Thanks for being with us tonight. This is our last work session of the year. We have a few agenda items that we're gonna go with tonight. And I don't know what I did with my agenda, but we're gonna start out, I'm sure, talking about the audit, the 2020 audit. So with that, I'm gonna let Lorraine and Tim take it away.
Did you want to start off, Lorraine?
Thank you, Mayor. I think that we have you starting off, Tim. So
Okay.
You go through the audit and I'll walk them through the financial statements and cover anything else that you're not addressing.
Okay. And knowing that Lorraine will go through this in a lot more detail than I do, I'm not going to go through too much. I'm just going to hit the highlights that more of the things that stick out for us. Keep in mind that this audit is still somewhat your previous administration, your previous finance department. So it was still unraveling that needed to be done and going through. And so going forward, I know 21 will be a lot easier because Lorraine's been working with it all the way through. But we were still going through a lot of the predecessor stuff. And you guys just have a lot of different things going on. And so I think a lot of that was a lot of the struggle as far as trying to figure out, okay, where is this at? Where does that need to go? Which loans were funded or refunded, paid off? What was your federal grants? What wasn't federal grant? You had all the CRF money, the CARES money that went through. Just a lot of different projects. We had to transfer water and sewer line improvements that had actually been started in previous years, but we actually transmitted them this year, and getting that recorded correctly. And Lorraine caught me on that one because I was adjusting for stuff that we had, assuming we had capitalized them in the prior year, but we hadn't capitalized them in the prior year, or we had, but not transferred them. So again, just still lots of different things going on. I think we're in better shape. Our biggest issue has always been the sewer fund as far as where the sewer fund's at. So I will point that out. That is a lot better than where we've been in the past. Like I said, I'm not going to necessarily flip through a bunch of pages. I'm just going to hit highlights. General fund, your carry forward, and I'm not necessarily going to flip through pages because I know Lorraine will do that. General fund, your carryover is $1,957,000. That's a good, healthy reserve. Your total expenditures in general fund were just under 3.4 million, so good carryover there. Ramp fund still has $741,000. We've talked internally. I'm not sure exactly where you guys ended up with as far as how much of the ramp you want to keep for future maintenance and how much of that is for ongoing projects. But again, you spent down to 741 at the end of the year. Sales tax improvement fund, you actually have a surplus, so you added 463,000 to it. You have just under $5 million in sales tax. Your 1% street sales tax, you continue to spend that down. Some of those bond proceeds as well as your taxes is coming in and the debt service related. That was spent down 885,000. You still have $1.5 million left in there. Like I said, the biggest thing that is the change and what we've cautioned about and where you're at is your wastewater fund and the sewer project and how that all went through. Your total equity in sewer fund is obviously going up because you continue to do capital projects and add to the plan. That does not necessarily mean that you have available equity to spend. So the biggest thing is, as I cautioned last year, we have deficit equity, unrestricted equity in the wastewater fund. We still have deficit unrestricted equity in the wastewater fund. The biggest difference this year to last year is for 2019, you have to have, under your loan agreements, you have to basically have positive cash in the combined water and wastewater fund. For 2019, you still had to transfer, and I think we did this for 2018 as well. You had to transfer in money to have available cash resources, or essentially what we did is we got you to a zero cash balance. For 2020, you actually have about $500,000 of positive cash over and above your restricted amount in the combined water and wastewater, so you did not have to do a transfer. You'll still have to see, and this has been the ongoing challenge of where are you going to end up overall once all the projects are completed, once all the grant draws have been done, once all the loans have been done, where are you going to end up overall cash-wise, and how much total is the city having to contribute towards the wastewater project. But at least funds from the other funds or advanced cash from the other funds in order to meet your loan restrictions. So while your equity in wastewater did not necessarily improve, your unrestricted equity in wastewater did not necessarily improve, your overall cash position across the two definitely is significantly better than what it was. When you'll be able to start paying those funds back will be something that you'll need to monitor internally as far as where your cash flow is, how much of that, and when you can start paying some of that money back, because you don't want to tie your hands too much cash flow wise in your utility funds. But overall cash position, you're much improved from where you were at the previous year. So that's primarily our highlights. We did do a single audit again for 2020. We were notified after the fact that you had, or actually, I think there was some, the letter went to the wrong party and we didn't necessarily get that for 2019 until later. But basically, we had a single audit related to your federal loan that you received. No issues with that. And Andy, I was going to ask you, because I know we had sent that draft over to you, I think late September, if you're good with that and we can go ahead and get the single audit wrapped up as well. Just let us know if you guys are good with that so we can go ahead and get that process done as well. But other than that, I think the biggest thing, and again, this will be more Lorraine's books for 2021. So there won't be as much unraveling that has to be done. And part of the issue or part of the balancing act is trying to give Lorraine enough time to go through everything before we come out, while still allowing us to get through our stuff before our next cycle starts. And unfortunately, we were not able to do that this year. We just got a late start on the audit this year, but that's, again, it took longer to get through stuff and unravel stuff.
I think Tim froze up.
So I think the biggest thing is, as long as we try and get the audit started sooner, and our goal would be is if we can have everything wrapped up by the end of June before our next cycle starts, that would be ideal. But overall, your books are in significantly better shape than what they were for 2019. 2019, with all the things that were going on, things were just not being posted correctly. That's why you have someone on internally that now understands your software and knows how to make it work correctly. Now it's just a matter of getting those bugs worked out. One of the things we that came up at the last minute, I just happened to notice, was your developer deposits. It's still sitting a little weird at the end of 2020 in the financial statement. We talked about whether or not we changed that. That's one of those things that Lorraine's still working on unraveling and getting fixed. But you're definitely heading in the right direction as far as getting your book straight. I'll let you fire away, Lorraine, unless you guys have questions specifically for me.
Does anybody have any questions at this point for Tim? All right, go for it, Lorraine.
Well, thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Tim, for those nice comments. And I can echo them back toward you and all this organizational knowledge you have for the city and all the work that you do that some auditors would not do to help unravel some of these things and to set up schedules for capital assets, et cetera, in your offices that may not have been existent at the city's offices. So I've really appreciated working with you on this audit, and last year's as well, getting that out when we did. But tonight I would like to walk through the audit. As I mention usually at this time of year when walking through an audit with the council, is that my goal is to describe it enough to you that you feel like you can either, you know what you want to dig into more, or that you feel satisfied that you understand what's in there and you've accomplished your fiduciary responsibility for reviewing the financial status of the city for that year, and you can put it on the shelf if you never want to dig into it again. So please feel free to ask me questions during this or later or much later if you have something come up. But I'll just walk you through what's in this report, and hopefully that will give most of you the sense of confidence and put your minds at ease that you're up to date on the financial statements for the city. So if we go to the packet, which included this draft of the audit, and it's virtually done. I think there's one or two number changes on how much is going to be held in emergency reserve versus unreserved. That still needs to be updated. I don't think there's any other changes forthcoming. Are there, Tim? Do you recall any others?
No, I think the only things that were not in the packet were Lorraine and I were going back and forth just to add some background. Getting back to the transfers and the projects that were completed and the assets that were transferred into the water and sewer fund. If you remember for prior years, we were really trying hard to make sure that your enterprise funds were Tabor compliant. And in order for those to be Tabor compliant, we had to make sure that some of those state grant funded projects did not actually go through the water and wastewater funds. Now that you've got all your grants or you had received all your grants, that wasn't as much of an issue, or that wasn't an issue. So that's why some of those water and sewer improvements that were done in prior years were finally transferred this year. So when we transferred those, your water fund and your sewer fund are no longer Tabor enterprise funds. So as Lorraine pointed out, we had to set aside emergency reserve funds in the water and wastewater. So I think the draft that you guys have has not incorporated those additional Tabor reserves, but we've already incorporated in the draft. We've got them done internally. I just don't think we sent you a new draft because we didn't want to confuse you with the last minute changes. So we've computed the fact that there's additional water and sewer reserves. It's just not in the version that you've got. And I think that was the only thing, and maybe some MD&A adjustments because we made changes on our side and Lorraine had to make some changes on her side. So but that's the primary change that from the draft that you guys have.
So thank you. So if we'll go to the copy of the financial statements that are in the agenda packet, I'm starting with page 7 of the PDF, and it's the one titled Management Discussion and Analysis. And this is a
Lorraine?
yes.
I'm wondering if it would be, and I'll defer to council's preference, would it be better for you to screen share or go this route?
I would like to see it on the screen. I think it's easier to keep up with. Kind of do both.
Okay.
All right. Can you see that management discussion and analysis now?
I think it's about to come up here. Give it just a moment. It hasn't popped up yet, Lorraine, but
Yeah, it's trying, but it hadn't done it.
it's a big document.
Yeah. My screen says it is. Your screen sharing, but it's probably still loading.
Lorraine, were you trying to share the agenda or just that one document?
I just have
Whole
it in
packet.
that one in the document. It's the agenda. It's the first section of the agenda packet that I'm sharing right now, which is part of the audit.
Okay. I'm wondering if we might have more success if you just share the audit document separately. Is that possible? Do you have that handy?
From the email version?
Or the PDF? Yep. 'Cause I'm just thinking maybe it's getting hung up with sharing the entire council packet, agenda packet.
Okay.
There we go. We got it.
Okay, it just came through? Good. Okay.
And Lorraine, if it's possible for you to enlarge that a couple times, that would be great on our end.
Getting back there, it's not lighting all these things.
Sorry.
What are you seeing now?
We see a list of, you were on the document, then you switched. There you go. Now you're back on the document. If you can just at the top there, use the plus sign, I think that'll do it. Maybe not.
I think it is maxed, actually.
But it's
Okay,
pretty
won't
small.
go over 100.
What we're seeing is pretty small. John, do you have any ideas? John
I was
Kate?
going to suggest maybe I could share the document and see if it works better for me.
Okay. Do you need her to send it to you, John?
I've got it.
Okay.
Mine just went up to 110. I'm having some success here. So there, it'll be better if I share, but maybe I'm looking at months.
Oh, I haven't shared it. Do you want to try one more time, and then if it doesn't work, I'll do it?
Yes, I had some
Okay.
success and it canceled out. So let me see. How's that?
Right now, you're not screen sharing, Lorraine.
Oh,
It's-
John is. Let me get that back.
Okay.
Sorry for the technological difficulties.
Well, it'll be better once we get it set up here, the way we want it. No problem.
No, it's not responding.
Oh, and now it just came up, but give it a moment, Lorraine.
Okay.
Oh. Did we lose Lorraine? We lost Lorraine, I think. Yeah, no, that's a better size there. Can everybody see that pretty well? Whoops.
That was my screen. I can put it up and run it for her, I think.
Okay, but that was a better size, I think, for everybody.
We're waiting for Lorraine to get back, aren't we?
We are, yep. Let me give her a call. Maybe she didn't realize she's bumped out. She's rejoining in just a moment. John, do you see her in the waiting room yet?
She's coming now.
Okay.
Which idioms? Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can, Lorraine.
Thank you. I apologize. I don't know what kicked me out. I didn't like what I was doing. So I will get into this. The management's discussion and analysis is the required letter that's at the beginning of every audit that tells what the numbers mean to some extent. And I think these can be really useful documents for you if you ever get questions from reporters or students that are saying, oh, can you tell me how the year went? You know, how's it going financially? You can say, yeah, let me get right back to you. I'll call you in 10 minutes, and then grab this and you can kind of go through some of these highlights and speak knowledgeably with some very distinct figures about how things are going. So for 2020, the financial highlights are that your net position was at 47.5 million. So that's a great number that you can throw out there. And the net position of the city increased during 2020 by 2.5%, by over $1 million. But that third bullet kind of shows, the third and fourth, the difference between the governmental activities decreasing by 2 million and the business type activities increasing by 1.2 million. 3.2 million, I'm sorry. So that's what netted with the 1.16 million. And it tells you that, again, kind of what Tim was alluding to or mentioned, that the reason that the business type activities, which are your water and wastewater activities, increase in net position is because you got grants. So when someone gives you that money, it increases your net position, and then you change it into a capital plan, and it keeps that net position higher because you have the value of that plant. But it doesn't increase your net income or your coverage of expenses because you're spending that grant money on the cost of the plant, and it certainly didn't pay for the whole cost of the plant. And then the fifth bullet there is at the end of the year, cities' governmental funds reported combined ending fund balances of 9.2 million. And this was a decrease, partly because of drawing down the monies that had been intended to be spent from the 1% sales tax bond funds and increased expenses in the general fund. So this first page can be really helpful. I just want to pause a minute here on this next section, which usually we gloss over, but with the monthly updates that I've been going through with you, I've been talking about the different types of funds, and we've been talking about that during the budget process too, and how those governmental funds are tracking the money that you have coming in, and whether you have high enough rates and taxes to finance your operations. Whereas the water and wastewater funds, the enterprises, are run like a business where you're looking at their total net position, whether it's cash or assets in the ground. This part of this page tells you that there are government-wide financial statements, which you don't get every month. They're not produced every month. They're just in this annual report that converts those governmental ones that are just money in, money out trackers to what would it look like if we really did track the value of all those assets in the ground, all those buildings, all those streets, curb and gutters, signs, parks, etc. And that's what this government-wide financial statements do, which are two different charts or schedules or statements that are in this major financial report. And they convert everything onto that page for the general fund and the governmental funds too. That's what government-wide financial statements are. Then moving down, we see the fund financial statements that you get every month in your financial statements. What did each fund's revenues versus expenditures look like, and how much fund balance does that leave, or how much cash does that leave at the end? And you have three different types of funds, which it says in the last sentence there. You have the governmental funds that we talk about all the time, the general fund and the special revenue funds and the capital projects funds. The proprietary funds, which are enterprise funds that we talk about all the time. And then you also have the third type, which is fiduciary funds, which we just skip over all the time because those are just monies that are for a third party that you are in charge of holding or tracking, but they don't really increase or decrease cities' net position. So the first sentence of that next page tells you most of the city's basic services are reported in the governmental funds, which focus on how money flows into and out of those funds. And the restricted fund balances are the cash or receivables that can be converted quickly to cash. The proprietary funds, the next heading halfway down, is your enterprise funds. There's other types of proprietary funds that you don't have, so you just have enterprise funds as your proprietary funds. And it tells, for each of those water and wastewater funds, what's combined in the entity-wide statements for proprietary. And then these fiduciary funds, you've got the Hanson Cemetery Fund, which is Fund 15, and you've got the Police Pension Fund, which is your Fund 71 in the monthly financial reports that really just show very little activity, and you're holding those funds for designated purposes to the benefit of the pension plan and or the cemetery. Okay, let's go forward. Here's the first table in this MD&A, which combines the totals into the most succinct table you'll see in the whole report. And this is a condensed picture of the net position of the city at the end of 2020, and it shows how it differed from 2019. So for those governmental activities, which are generally your governmental funds, that are usually just measuring inflow and outflow of revenues and expenses, it does show this whole section, the second line of non-current assets. And that's what's the value of your buildings and infrastructure. On the business types, those are always shown on your statements that you get every month, and then the totals. So when on that first page on the highlights, we said the governmental funds had combined fund balances of around 9.2. That's the current and other assets essentially. Whereas these non-current assets of 36 million are bumping up the net position to 35 million. You have liabilities drawing against that. And that's where in the total column, you see 47,000 as the bottom line of the 2020 total column is for both governmental and business. And it's gone up a bit since the year before, from 46 to 47 million. Those capital assets there, they can't be spent unless you sell them. So they're not available for your operating costs, but you use them for your operations. So they're very important. And that's why they're shown on this statement and those entity-wide statements. Let's go further. We'll keep going, but you can read through this if you wish, and it tells you how those different amounts of the fund balance changed and what's what. But here's how here you go, the activities were for the year, as opposed to the statement we were just looking at that showed where you ended up with cash and capital assets and what liabilities and loans you had against them. This is more the income statement, which shows how you got your additional money in this year to move it up from 46 million to 47 million. You had revenues coming in and you had expenses going out, and the net at the bottom of the 2020 column is an increase in that position of 1.16 million. That brings it to that 47.5 for the year. And again, way to the left at the bottom is increase or decrease in that position. And those governmental ones did go down. And the middle two columns show the enterprise funds, and they did go up. So that harkens back to the highlights. Let's go further. After these two sections we just looked at, which roll everything up into those two condensed reports, there's more information here about each type and what happened there. And this is the first part about the governmental activities and how they decreased in net position. And they did donate $920,714 worth of assets to the water and wastewater funds. That's what Tim was mentioning about booking a contribution in 2020 for water and sewer line improvements that were made by the 1% sales tax fund. And that 1% sales tax can be used for water and wastewater. And it was, along with street improvements and line improvements done at the same time. But then they have to get donated over to the water and wastewater funds. So that was $1 million worth of improvements almost that came out of that 1% sales tax that's dedicated to capital needs. And that shows why, partly why the governmental funds went down in value during 2020, because they donated assets to the business type activities, water and wastewater. I like this chart. This bears out what I was saying, how governmental activities are primarily sponsored by taxes. You're not selling or services like the water and wastewater activities are to customers. You're getting revenues from that. You're getting taxes, 66.5% from sales and use taxes, another 3.7% from property taxes. The 14.1%, the red section, is operating grants and contributions. And frankly, that's state and federal taxes that they're sharing with you. So that's tax-based as well. There's only like 9.1%, darker blue section, that's from charges for services, like what you charged when you issue a building permit or things of that nature that you're charging people for their use of something. And then going further to the expenses, you see that program revenues, which are charges for services, are shown in red, and they're minimal compared to the expenses that have to be financed through taxes. Keep going. Business type activities is completely different. Let's look at that first section there, increased by 3.2 million. And a lot of it came from state grants, 1.4 million. And capital contributions from the Sales Tax Improvement Fund, another 920,000. So that, and another 600,000 came from the forgiveness of those 2 loans you got from the Colorado Water Resources and Power Development Authority. You had 2 $300,000 loans. Both of them were forgiven in 2020. And then that's also what Tim was mentioning, waiting to this year 2020 to turn those loans to grants, so to speak, so that you wouldn't have to do a single audit in 2019. And I'm sorry, so that you wouldn't have to lose your enterprise status per Tabor in 2019. You just lost it in 2020 when you were going to lose it anyway because of these other loans. Sorry, other grants. So here's your grants and contributions. They're huge. Charges for services are around 38.9%, and you very little investment income in the lockdown economy. Keep going. And here's the city's, keep going. We're just going to talk about the city's 4 major funds that are governmental funds, just because that's what's required in the MD&A. You also have the little conservation trust fund that's not required to be spoken about here because it doesn't meet the criteria for being a major fund. But the general fund's the biggie, and it did have a decrease in its fund balance this year of 378,000. Again, almost all of its resources come from taxes and intergovernmental revenue sources, and somewhat from licenses and permits, fines, and charges for services. Keep going. And here's your expenditures by category: general government, public safety, etc. Then we just talked briefly about the RAMP fund and what it is. And you're all familiar with that. What happened in the sales tax improvement fund is mentioned, and it talks about revenues exceeding expenditures in that fund by 463,000. So it is built up to do future projects. Talks about the street improvement fund and revenues from sales taxes and grants and interest, total 857,000. So that's doing well. Then water fund is a major enterprise fund, and the wastewater fund is a major enterprise fund. And the water fund did have an operating income of 266,000, 000, where your charges to your customers outweighed the operating expenses. You have other expenses such as debt service, but your operating income was good in that fund. Which then you look at the wastewater fund, and it had operating loss of $4,314 during the year. So that's one reason you can see right there why your rate increases are going to be much a higher percentage for wastewater than for water. It's having an even harder time covering its operating expenses than water is. We'll skip these next two sections because they're going on, but we have to just say, how you're budgeting in the economic factors that COVID and the lockdown, it wasn't really COVID, it was lockdown that really hurt you during the year, and the full impact is yet to be determined on the city. But next year's budget's looking pretty good, and you're continuing to watch that and to budget fairly conservatively. So that's the MD&A, and I'll go more quickly through the rest of this. But here is the auditor's opinion, which comes next, and it's very prescribed what he has to state here as to what his responsibility is and what management's responsibility is. But the top of page 2 is where the rubber hits the road, which is the auditor's opinion. And it is, in our opinion, the financial statements referred to above present fairly in all material respects the respective financial position of the governmental activities, the business type activities, each major fund, etc. So that's what you want. It's called a clean opinion, and you've got it. And so that's what all of your investors are looking for, your bondholders, and anyone who may be looking at future loans to the city are glad to see that clean, unqualified opinion. Let's skip forward. It doesn't comment on how you're doing it, just comments that you can rely on these statements as being materially correct. And if there were major concerns about how you're doing, that would probably be mentioned as well. There was a concern, but there's not. So this is a good opinion for you. Now we're going to go to the thing that appears here is the two statements that we already saw in condensed form. The statement of net position, just look at that bottom number. It's going to be the $47 million number that we saw in the condensed form in the MD&A. It's the second from the bottom line there, total net position 47.5. And then the next report is the same thing. It's not the condensed form, it's the full-fledged form of how your revenues and expenditures change through the year. So we'll skip these. It ends with the same 47 million in the total column, 47.5. And then we get to what you are more familiar with, it's just the fund balance sheets. So skipping, this is the one for the governmental funds, and you see there's 4 funds listed on this page. And let's look at what the bottom line says, John. Total fund balance is the second from the bottom lines. We're going to go to the next page on screen and look at the total after the Conservation Trust Fund is added in. It's the $9,213,250 that I mentioned earlier. It's not that $35 million figure that was in that it was when it showed all the capital assets. This is your revenues and expenditures, beginning fund balance plus revenues and other sources minus expenditures and other uses equals ending fund balance. So slide back over to the general fund on the previous page. And you'll see at the bottom there, oh, I'm sorry, let's go to the next schedule. This shows cash and receivables. Let's go to the revenues and expenditures. Keep going. That was the reconciliation of how you get from the fund statements to the entity-wide. But this shows you the revenues to the general fund, 3 million, expenditures, 3.3 million. That shows you're drawing down your fund balance by 362. You also had a transfer out. So the net change in the fund balance is 378,000. Keep going. And you ended up with the 1.957 million in general fund balance. And as Tim mentioned, scroll up so you can see both total expenditures and the fund balance, please. There you go. So the 1957 is 57% of your annual expenditures. So that is a good amount to have in your general fund balance. And again, we always think about how much are you going to need in your fund balance? Is it a problem if it drops by 378? Well, you still got more than half a year's money expenditure amount in your fund balance should something happen and your revenues go away. Your revenues were 3 million, so you've got 2/3 of what you would get annually in your revenues in your fund balance. So I think you could reasonably assume that that would get you through a total crisis of no income, or massive flood that wipes out your revenue stream. It would get you through, be able to pay your employees to do all the things they would have to do in a crisis like that, before you got any federal emergency management money coming in. You'd have money to get you through a crisis. The other funds are being drawn down, some of them, and some built up. The second column, which we can't see the title on with it expanded like this, but the second one is the ramp fund, which is intentionally being drawn down till it's gone. The third one is the sales tax improvement fund, and then the street sales tax fund. So when we look at the bottom of those, we'll see the sales tax improvement fund added to its fund balance this year, 463,000. And the street drew down some of those bond monies by 885. Conservation Trust went up by 10,000 because you're not really spending that, you're saving it for a project in the future. So let's keep going to, let's go to the proprietary funds now, which are the enterprise funds for you. And here you've got your assets and liabilities, and you see your assets in the water fund, wastewater fund. It shows monies in internal balances that you owe back to the general fund and to the 1% sales tax improvement fund. And that is because of those advances that were made in prior years. So that is drawing you into that negative current assets position that Tim mentioned in the wastewater fund. You do have non-current assets that are in the ground and not spendable unless you sell them, therefore that bring you up to the nice net net position. Go to the next schedule, please. Here we have the revenues and expenses coming in. And here you'll see where we get to that operating income or loss. So this is just showing utility charges coming in, because that's from operations, sending out those utility bills. Then you have your operating expenses, which do include depreciation. So when you subtract that from your revenues, you get an operating income of 266,000 for water, but wastewater is in the negative. Well, we know that depreciation isn't cash out the door. It's just a deterioration of the lifespan of the asset. So it's not like you're spending money you don't have here, but your operating income is going down because theoretically you should be putting money aside to replace those assets, not just not have anything when they're done. Scroll down a little, please. The rate increases will improve this, and that's why when REF does those rate increases, they ask for so much information about future capital projects and your operations, and they run all these scenarios of you increased operating revenues this much here or tap fees that much there, how it's going to impact these bottom line numbers as far as cash and operating income and having money there to replace the plant when needed. At the bottom part here, you see contributed capital, and that's usually plant investment fees from developers on that first line. But this huge intergovernmental revenue that came in through grants and loans, the grants is the contributed capital. And some of the revenue there, other, adds to 920,714. That's what came from the 1% sales tax fund. I'm sorry, yeah, 1% in sales tax improvement fund. Those were those water and sewer lines that added to the value of these funds. All right, let's get out of these numbers and look at some of the notes. Keep going. We're not going to spend time on the statement of cash, but pause there for a minute, please. This is the proprietary fund statement of changes in net assets, and it just shows the activity in that fund, those two funds. Transfer in from the general fund to pay the police pension, paid the pensioner. It's not the city's funds anymore, it's the pensions funds. And the Hanson Cemetery Trust has always had about 9,000 in it. When the year started, it got nominal interest and there was no other activity. Okay, we'll move on. Here's the notes of the financial statements, which I won't go through in their entirety. I'll just show you what's here if you're interested. But it does have good information. Again, if people ask you about your city, it tells you what's included in your reporting entity. It's really just the city per se. There's no housing authority or anything like that that's included. So scroll down, please. And it tells you about those government-wide and financial statements and how they are described, which we just went through. Keep going. This whole note 1 tells you what these the basis of coming up with these numbers is, and we just went through that. Keep going a little until we get to keep going. It describes these funds more clearly, what the general fund is, and then it goes on to the special revenues and how they have taxes or some other resource that can only be spent for certain types of expenditures. And then you have the 2 capital funds, and then your proprietary funds and fiduciary. Cash and investments shows you, keep going, please. How you get your property taxes, when they're levied, things like that. Your receivables, how you account for those, what your inventory basis is. Keep going. Capital assets on the next page, it shows you how much of a useful life you give to the various types. The previous page showed over $5,000 with a useful life of a year or more. Compensated absences, what you would need to pay people if they all quit or were laid off at once, as far as unpaid PTO or that type of obligation. And then this next section shows all of your long-term debt. Keep going. This describes what long-term debt is, I should have said. Keep going. Keep going down. Budgets, this tells you about your budget calendar if you're ever curious, so it has to happen by when. This is laid out in here. The mill levy, etc. Cash and investments, what types they're in, and keep going. You just scroll past this, John, of what you're allowed to invest in and how you've got things divided up at year end, and you're using your local government investment pools. That's a list from the state statutes of what cities like yours are allowed to invest in. They can't just go out on the stock market and start, investing willy-nilly. You do most of your investing through these combined local government investment pools, which pool your money with other cities and towns to get a higher rate. Let's keep going. This is restricted cash, where you can only spend it for certain items, and anything in their cemetery fund has to go for that. Anything in the conservation trust fund, etc. So there's items there about what's been restricted by law. We've got capital assets now, and this tells you at a glance what types of things were added or deleted during the year, and it shows you construction in progress, whether it was buildings, improvements, equipment, and what the depreciation is. The governmental capital assets that went onto that balance sheet to pop it up, 36 million went on there, give you a high amount of capital assets on the entity-wide statements. Keep going. And the next section shows the business type, and this is your water and wastewater. Of course, keep going, please. There you go. That's the land. Your water rights are assets. Your construction in progress, which is mostly your wastewater treatment plant. Once it's done and put online, it'll go down below into the capital assets for equipment for water, or I'm sorry, improvements other than buildings. That's a tremendous amount of capital assets add in a year for a city your size. We're going to look at this advances section next, and this is one of the more critical items that you have to keep in mind as you go forward, is how much money is owed back to these other funds by your wastewater fund. The water fund has this had an advance in 2005 for 73 grand. You're on a 10-year repayment schedule. I assume you could just pay that back now and get it over with. Same with the 2005 advances in the wastewater fund for 13,000 and maybe the 77. But those amounts in 2018 and 2019 are big amounts, and you don't currently have payback schedules set up. So Andy and I are going to be talking with Tim about that, whether to convert them to loans, whether to, how to address those going forward. But that is an issue for the city that shouldn't be forgotten. Here's your actual long-term debt to other parties. The street sales tax bonds to the bondholders is all you have in the governmental activities. There's a premium on those bonds. You paid off your capital lease, so the balance at 12/31 is 0. And then you have those accrued compensated absences that are, calculated. It's not, people could draw those down and take their vacation better and really change that amount. And it's unlikely that everyone does leave at once and you have to pay those off. But that's technically a long-term debt. Here's any information you want to know about this bond. So people say, well, how much did you borrow? When was that? What kind of interest rate did you get? It's when you're going to be done paying them off. It's all laid out here for you. Going. This tells the lease purchase that was paid off. And then the same thing with the business type activities. It tells each one of your notes or bonds. These are all notes to Colorado entities, the Water Conservation Board and the Colorado Water Resources Power Development Authority and the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. So you can see under the forgiveness or payments, those $300,000 forgiveness amounts from the CDPHE. So those turned from being loans you were supposed to pay back to being grants of money in 2020. Then you've got the two big $3 million loans from Water and Power Authority, first one in 2019, the second one in 2020. So that's what the most of your balance that's due to others of the $9,721,000 is owed to the Water and Power Authority. But there are, 2.7 million owed to the other funds in the city. That keeps you from doing other things with those funds, like building parking structures or parks or anything else that you may need those general revenues for. All right, we're going to skip forward, John. We're going to finish off this debt section. It shows all the details of each of these loan agreements again, when they're due, how much they were for. Keep going. We're not going to carry over these. And that's the end of this first document. You'll need to pull up the second document that's in the agenda packet, and we'll go quickly through the rest, which to do with budgets largely. Oh, there's a giant note 7 on the pensions that's prescribed that has to go in there because you are part of the Fire and Police Pension Association plan. And so this note is required because you technically have a share in that, and future increases in payments to the pensioners is required. You're fine. I'm not going to go over anything in specific here, but it tells how all those obligations were considered for the city's share, and that flows forward to that first balance sheet that we looked at, the statement of net position. And this is about 7 pages long. Actuarial information. Okay, then we get to just other notes that are disclosures that are required, talks about the Tabor Amendment and what it requires. Says that you're in compliance with it. The whole mention of the water and wastewater funds not being Tabor eligible anymore means they can't be viewed as enterprises for purposes of issuing debt or for required emergency reserves. So when they're enterprises, you don't have to put a 3% reserve aside for emergencies. Everyone does probably anyway, but it's not required in the audit to be listed as such. Yours now is, and you would need a vote to go for an election for anything to benefit those water and wastewater funds, debt or raising taxes. It used to be they were enterprises and you didn't need a vote to issue the debt. It changes from year to year, so you could retain the enterprise debt in a future year. And this is additional information about how you handle your risk management. So moving forward, I think the last note, 10. Let's go to the next section, which shows your budgets. And we're going to go very quickly through this. There's required information about how more pension requirements, just skip that. 10-year history is required. This is budgetary information that's required. So you spent a lot of time on your budgets. And earlier in all those tables we were looking at, those schedules and statements, there was no mention of the budget. It's all here in the back of the audit. It tells what the original and or final budget are, what you actually spent, and whether there's a variance. Of course there is, since the budget's an estimate. And then how what you spent in 2020 compares to the 2019 actual. And again, this is something I really appreciate that Tim does. He puts the 29 actual on these statements. Many auditors aren't doing that anymore, but it really helps you to look from year to year and see, oh yeah, this is what we usually spend, or oh, here's a change. Oh yeah, here we've got this intergovernmental revenue in 2020 for federal grants of $383,000 that made our revenues way different than the year before. So you can skip through that. You are in compliance with all of your budgets. You didn't spend more than you had appropriated. So that's the other reason that these reports are here, to show the reader that you are following your budgets, not ignoring them. And there's a budget to actual for every department. I'm sorry, for every fund here in the back of the book. And again, you can look through these if you wish, but we can skip through them pretty quickly now. The bottom line is good on all of them. Stop on this one. And when you get to the expenditures total, back right there, it says total expenditures is kind of indented in a lighter color. The budget was 2.098 million, and the actual was that second column. So it shows that you're well under your budget by $1,743,000. And each one of these is showing you that you didn't exceed what was budgeted with what you actually spent. The water and wastewater funds are slightly different from what you see at the front of the book, because here they're shown on the budgetary basis. And they have to show what money really went out the door or came in the door, as opposed to shifting of a grant to a capital asset on the balance sheet. So this shows how you budgeted and what your basis was, But again, you're okay on both your water and wastewater fund for how you budgeted. At the bottom of this one, it'll show a budget to GAAP reconciliation, because budgeting based on what money is coming in and out versus GAAP, which is whether your assets or liabilities declined or increased with a loan or principal payment, for instance, is treated differently. For budget, you have to show you're going to spend it, but in your financials, it just shows you reduced your liability to pay back the loan. So that's there. The last 2 pages of the audit report after this wastewater budget actual are required reports for the state about highway user taxes and your other highway expenses that's filed each year with the state, and this form is required to be stuck in the back of the audit. I appreciate all your attention to this. I know it's a lot of numbers. I know you have a very healthy interest in these numbers and the financial reports I give, which I've appreciated. Again, for those of you who aren't so much interested in finances, other types of things, not everyone has a love of this. I appreciate your attention and looking at it. And I hope you feel like you've seen enough that you can feel satisfied that your financial statements are done right and that you're in good shape, and you can, like I said, set that on your shelf.
All right, does anybody have any questions or something that we don't understand that you'd like clarification on our audit?
I
All
think
right.
the audit looks good. You know, I spent some time with it before the meeting, and I just want to suggest, it looked like to me that it was on page 32 of the presentation, where it goes into how much debt we've got to pay back on the wastewater and water. And I was only spending extra time on that because I know there's going to be a lot of concern with rate increases and why that's necessary. You know, we have to pay for the infrastructure, and we went many years and did not have any rate increases. And I had asked Lorraine when we had the meeting at the 4 Points meeting at the Carlson Elementary School, and I did spend more.
You muted yourself, Chuck. You muted yourself.
Oh, sorry. I just wanted to thank Lorraine for spending the extra time when we were at Carlson with the 4 Points presentation. I had asked her about this, and I spent some extra time with the material before the meeting tonight. And it is pretty evident why we're going to have to increase those water rates. And I'm just preparing myself because I know all the council members will probably be pummeled when the rates go up, you know, and I just don't see any way of getting around it.
Thank you.
We'll discuss that further next week, will we not? Okay, I'll save my powder for then. I do have some questions if it's my turn about the revenue and the expenditures on the financial. I know when you have an excess of revenue, it covers a lot of sins. And the bottom line looks good because of that, but there's some areas of concern, I think. And I don't have them all, but just for an example, on page 5, other professional services, we're over by 92%. I don't know what other professional services actually means.
Arthur?
Hmm.
Lorraine, that will be next. Once we finish this part, the audit, Lorraine's going to walk through the
I thought you did. Okay.
you're referring to, and that'd be a good
Okay.
time to bring that up,
Okay.
if that works.
Yeah, that's fine. Of course.
I don't know if Tim has any comments, anything I said, or any corrections.
No, that's, I mean, and I knew that you would go through it in a lot more detail, and that's why I didn't want to go through everything in duplicate. But yeah, I mean, for the most part, like I said, and Lorraine pointed out, yes, you do receive a clean opinion, and thank you, Lorraine, for doing that. Yes, there is and that's been the concern with the sewer project, is definitely the amount of debt that you've taken on, the amount of advances that you borrowed. And that's been an ongoing discussion with your management team all the way through, is how do you fund that going forward? Like you said, rate increases to recover some of that. And how do you free those funds back up and get them back into the other funds so that you can do some other projects with them, and what's your time frame on that? So you're not out of the woods, even though the project may be getting close. You're not out of the woods as far as how do you get that money back into the city to be used for other purposes. So.
Did you have some other thoughts, Art?
No, I am next week.
Okay, anybody else? Well, I'll say I like what Lorraine said, that in the opinion sheet, we didn't have any negative things that would throw up a red flag if somebody was to grab our audit and read through it. So that's good to hear. I believe that we all knew that doing this sewer plant upgrade, that it was going to cost the city and the users, increases to pay for this thing. So I'm sure that we will get this thing flattened out, and hopefully by next November, when we try to put something on the ballot again, hopefully it'll pass, and that will help pay for some of this debt. All right. With that, I guess we will move into our October finances. Lorraine, you going to keep going?
Yep, you can stand it. John, you're going to keep moving us forward, or do you want me to try to bring that up? Oh, you got it. Good. So here I'll go more quickly, but this will be some fresh information in your mind. So the first page always is the cash allocated, the total cash the city has, which is $9,019,000 at the end of October, and all of that gets combined, and the various shares are allocated back to the right funds based on who brought in what revenues and who had what expenditures. So move on down, and you'll see the general funds amount is $1.5 million, that top one. And you'll see the total allocated to other funds was exactly the amount that was in there, the $9,019,000. So going to the next page, we'll see that $1.5 million is the first amount on the general funds balance sheet. Its share of the combined cash is there. It has other receivables coming in, including those advances that are still due from water fund and wastewater fund, showing as assets. Let's scroll down, and you'll see the fund balance there. And that fund balance is the amount that's coming over from the 2020 amount that we just went through in the financial statements. Then we'll go into the next page, and we'll see that revenues over expenditures have declined so far in October by about $53,000. I shouldn't have had you advance. First, let's go back up one screen, please. We started with $1,826,000, and revenue over expenditures through October 31st was negative. There were more expenditures than revenues. That was as budgeted, that you were going to draw down the fund balance again. And so far this year, your fund balance has gone down to $1,773,000 in the general fund. Now move on to the revenues and expenses for general fund. And your top revenues are highlighted here, so you can see the past 2 years actuals and what you've got so far year to date this year. So year to date last year was in property taxes $174,000. This year's year to date through October is $177,000. Most of that is already collected for the year, since it's all due in the first half of the year. Your sales taxes are already at 97.9% of the budget. So that's good. You've got two more months of sales taxes to post, so that'll be over the budgeted amount more than likely. Your franchise fee is coming in as expected, and you may even go over because it's 93% of budget already. Building permits are behind as they have been all year from what was budgeted. It's a lower item though, but you get about half of what you thought you'd be this year when the budget was drawn up. Your special sales tax from marijuana is already over what was budgeted, and you've got 2 more months come. County road and bridge tax is over, and you've got one more that comes quarterly, 1 more quarter to come. And your highway user tax is lower, and that again has to do with the less travel. And they may be holding some of your taxes on that because of the audit not being filed yet. So I think that's going to bump up closer to what was expected. Fines, we've talked about that in the past. They're about 40% now of what had been budgeted. Your lease and rents they come in pretty close to on time each month. It's at 75%, so it's just a little behind. Could be a timing issue. So your total revenues there are already at 98.4% of what was budgeted for the year. So your general funds coming in very strong in the revenue department based on what was forecast. Then we look at each of these departments, and you've looked at them pretty closely in the budget, so I don't think I'm going to go through those. I just kind of glance at the bottom percentage for each one. You just passed streets at 79%, 79.5, and 83% of the year has elapsed. So it's a little under budget, which helps with the bottom line. This one's at 87%. Which one was this? Admin? I missed the title on, yeah, admin. And here's community promotion. And when we get to page 5, let's look at the question that Art had about professional services. Oh, I guess we passed it. If you would go back, I'd appreciate that, John. It's hard to see the page number. I don't know which one is page 5. 7. There we go.
John, you want to go down a little bit
Yeah.
There it is.
into admin, and then it's, I think on the first page of admin, go down a little bit. Keep going.
It's actually page 5. So John, you're just scrolling past page 6.
Okay,
Art had a question on page 5. So if you go up,
thank you.
see that's page 5. That one right there, and it's other professional services, 1010-5108, right there.
Thank you, Wonder.
I don't know if that's a question for Lorraine so much as just what are other professional services? I mean, specifically? That's all. I mean,
Specifically, that includes welding, just that type of services. Some of the traffic studies we've put under that, maintenance, repairs, that type of stuff for other professional services.
Okay. I have just come up during the year that we haven't, you can't foresee, basically. Is that correct, John?
That's correct. Unfortunately, we've had a lot of breakdowns this year, and
Well, I know.
I believe also it may have included some of the barricades that were made for Minor Street, but I believe that a lot of those, and correct me if I'm wrong, Andy and Lorraine, but if we do get reimbursed for those through CARES funds or whatever it is, it doesn't go back into streets, it just goes back into the general fund, if I'm not mistaken.
That's correct about CARES funds. If it were some kind of an insurance claim, we might credit the line item. It would depend on the situation.
Right, when we get to page 8, I will have some questions as well. If
Okay.
I'm allowed, please.
Let's go there. I think we're there anyway. And which line item?
10-21-0538, I believe. It says miscellaneous organization request. So, I mean, it's way out of line, and I'm sure there's a reason for it, but I'm just curious what that's all about.
That had to do, some of it had to do with individuals getting the Safeway certificates, and some of it was a gift to one of your local entities. Andy, do you recall what that would have been? It was not a donation to one of your local entities. I can go back and look it up. I did at one point. I can't remember now what it was called.
Yeah, I believe the CARES funding went through there to other individuals and to businesses, I believe. Does that sound familiar, John?
That was not our Safeway gift card program, correct?
There was some in there for that, I believe, but there was another larger amount that went to a local.
Oh, that was the business forgiveness. Was that the business loan forgiveness?
For it went through economic development.
Yeah, that was a grant as well, or CARES funding.
Does that have anything to do with the hotel rooms we provided for the residents at the lodge?
That might have been part of it too, because I think that's the catch-all for some of those unplanned expenses we had that benefited other individuals and organizations.
I believe it did have to do with the housing.
Well, you know, being on the committee, being on the council all year, all that makes sense to me, what you just said. Is there, if somebody from the public wanted, pick that out, is there anywhere where notations are made in a ledger somewhere or some notes supplementing the financial pages that indicates specifically what those are for? I mean, I'm happy with the explanation, but
Yes, sir.
if someone else, a resident was not happy with that because of not being on the council or attending their meetings like they should, would there be somewhere where specifically we could say, hey, it was A, B, and C? That's what concerns me more than anything.
Yes, sir. We have a detailed general ledger that actually we're printing each month that shows what comprised everything in every line item each month.
And the public would be able to see that. Is that correct?
That's public information.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
All right. That's good for me. Thank you very much.
Yep. Okay. So community promotion is a little over, probably because of that. Building inspection is a little under, quite a bit under, and keep on going department by department. Police total. %, and we're about 83% of the year elapsed, so that's pretty close. Same with court. And then transfer has been made for the year already to the fire department. That's at 100% of what was expected. Parks came in a little lower than anticipated, and most of that's probably expended for the year. Most operational expenses. And then the police pension, half of it's been transferred. The other half will be transferred before year end. And that's the one that goes to that fiduciary fund for the pensioner. And total fund expenditures are right around where you would expect it at this point in the year at 84.5%. You'll see down on the budget, or just back up, that the budget was budgeted to have net revenue over expenditures, that bottom line of minus 487,000, the way it was budgeted. And it looks like it will be not that much of a decrease if we stay on track like this. It's only 53% under at this point, but we shall see when the year ends. Here's that trust fund for the cemetery. It's still sticking around 9,000. Very little happening except interest. Oh, there's more interest this year than there will, maybe not less interest this year than the year before. Keep going to the next fund, please. Keep going. And here's this. This is a cemetery fund that the city runs. It has more money in it. It's not the trust fund for Hanson Cemetery, and it has revenues under expenditures by about $1,000 so far this year, and it had the fund balance of 101,000. Let's look at revenues and expenditures. Keep going. Year-to-date revenues were really just the interest earned. No new cemetery fees or donations yet. And none budgeted. And here's the expenditures, just minor repairs so far.
Lorraine, have you shared with them how the individual funds at the city level combine into the audit, just so that there's
Yes.
not that confusion?
Yes, and we're actually doing it for next year's budget. We talk about that pretty much every month. I just didn't mention it this one. The cemetery fund is part of the general fund when you look at the audit presentation, and so is the storm drainage fund that we'll get to near the end of this report. But starting next year, we won't have to add together anymore. They're all going to be they're all folded in.
We're going to make everybody's life easier.
Yep. Especially ours. Let's go forward. Ramp fund started with the $741,000 fund balance. We've drawn it down about $15,000 this year, so not so much expended this year as last year. Keep going. A little bit of interest. And expenditures, just some engineering. And you'll see there's that net revenue over expenditures or under, since it's in parentheses, of 15,000 this year being drawn down. Here's the improvement fund. It has that fund balance of $4,918,000. But look up above where all those assets are. You see those 3 listings for the years the advances were given. So, you know, more than half the assets are in receivables that at most of which we don't have a schedule that will of our timing as to when we'll receive those 2018 and 2019 amounts back. Here's your taxes, though, coming in very strong. Look again at the percentages. You've gotten 97% of your sales tax estimate so far. Building use tax, not much since the building is down. Sale of equipment, you've had a little bit this year, and a grant there from DOLA. Most of your expenditures this year were land acquisition, buying the building, $325,000, and your fund expenditures are still at 22% of what was budgeted. Conservation Trust Fund just pretty much has the lottery, quarterly lottery revenues coming in, and the fund balance will go up at the end of the year. We can skip through this one. Okay. Street sales tax, let's look at the beginning fund balance. This has $1.5 million. Let's keep going a little more quickly, I think. There's your major revenues coming in from sales tax and grants. No grants this year, but just probably previous years. But your sales tax is strong. It's a little bit too big, John, to see the percentage column on the right. Thank you. Perfect. And then your expenditures, let's look at those on the next page. And you've spent about half of what was budgeted, just with in one line item there, the asphalt curb and gutter. You have your year-to-date actual also for the bond payments, and you'll see another one of those. In November. Okay, water fund. Here we're going to get water fund, and let's look at the, you see most of this net position is the 13 million in improvements other than buildings, less accumulated depreciation, but keep going on down. And you show the liabilities of what has to be paid. You show the fund equity of 5.5 million at the beginning of the year. I guess that's after, that's current, because your beginning retained earnings were more. You've got 326,000 in revenue over expenditures so far this year. Keep going on to revenues and expenditures. Here's where you've got your usage fees, and they're on track. They'll probably be in a little higher than budgeted. They're at 91% after October. And then you've got, let's go to the expenditures. You've got operating. Oh, actually, let's go back up one page. I'm sorry, John, I rushed you. Let's look at the budget did show some debt proceeds, but those are not going to be there. That was we've talked about that in the past, how there was some misunderstanding about what was being reimbursed from already existing proceeds versus new proceeds. So this is about how your revenue picture is going to look at year end with just 2 more months of operating revenues added. And your proposed budget shows these right forecasts so that we're not, operating on a whim of thinking we're going to get some money that we won't. So that'll be, you're going to be looking good going forward. Here's your expenditures. Any questions on any of these line items? They're all coming in below budget pretty much. The operational is at 60%. And distribution, you scroll down, it's at 64%, and debt service is pretty much done. Wastewater, you've got a lot of assets here, but you've got a lot of liabilities as well, and that's partly what those debt service amounts were that Chuck pointed out. Let's scroll on down. You've got fund equity of about 9.9 million, a lot of which came from plant investment fees and capital grants over the years to give you those earnings. Here's your revenues and expenditures. And again, your user fees are already at 91% for the year. And you've got 2 more months of usage. Let's keep going. And your expenditures. %, they're below forecast for operations. Treatment operations, collections is at 70% also. And debt service is like there's maybe something else to be posted here before the year's over. Storm drainage, this is the other fund that rolls into the general fund. It is 24,000 in the fund balance and not much activity. It's going to become a department in the general fund going forward. No real revenues and no expenses. Here's the water fund CIP, which has to be subtracted from that other water fund, but it won't beginning next year when we combine them. Negative equity here subtracts from what the positive equity was over on the Fund 51. Just got some severance taxes here. And And the expenditures are at 67% of forecast. Wastewater, this is the CIP that really drags down the amount that was on the other page for Fund 52 by over 3.5 million. And it shows your grants were budgeted that you won't be receiving. You received a little bit, but you won't be getting 4 million this year. Total expenditures are at 28.9%. So this fund just had some portions of the project budgeted here, and I mean expensed here, and you're getting close to the end of the project. So any other questions on the, I guess we've got Fund 71 still. This is the last fund is that fiduciary fund that I always skip because it's just showing you the transfer that comes over from the general fund to pay for the pension. Are there any other questions on all that?
Actually, I had one, and let's not go back to it. But with the library building improvement fund, we had spent about a quarter of that budget on the with the actual. And I was wondering, was that for some of the landscaping, Andy, or was that on the building itself that the library that we spent that on?
I believe part of that went, I might have to look at it.
Yeah, okay, not a big deal. I don't need to know right now, but I was curious about it. I
Yeah,
couldn't
we did-
recall either.
We did the World War II memorial restoration. I'm
Yeah.
not sure that came out of that, whether that came out of sites and facilities line item or whether it came out of the library. It might have come out of the library because we did have money budgeted there. That wasn't going to be used this year for for other purposes.
You know,
Library.
that would probably explain it. It's about the right amount, I think.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I think you're right, Andy. I think that's where it came out of.
I think so too. Okay, thank you. I couldn't figure that out.
Sure.
That makes sense.
All right, anybody have any questions that they need clarified? Okay, Lorraine, if you would start at the beginning and run through it again for us.
I know, thank you for your attention. I know it's an awful lot. And I apologize that I couldn't operate the show myself because it makes it a little quicker that way too.
No, but like, since you've been on and given these reports or monthly updates, and I don't think I've ever been walked through and had my hand held through the audit like this, so I really appreciate that too. So,
Thank you.
okay. All right,
Okay, thank you to both of you.
yes.
Thank you. Thanks, Tim.
Tim, thank you very much for being here. It's nice to see your face.
Thanks,
Even though it's
guys.
not in person.
Thank you,
All
Mayor.
right.
Good night,
Thank you all.
everyone.
Thanks, Lorraine. Okay, let's move on to our final agenda item tonight. In your packet, and I don't know how y'all want to do this, but we have the MOU. As all the council knows, we've been working very closely with CDOT for several years, continuing to look at how the city would be able to partner up with them and produce a mobility hub. We keep going, and we had a visioning, as it said in our in the MOU, some city staff and CDOT from DTR and some other management structures of CDOT all had a visioning, and to make sure that what the city was looking at and what CDOT was looking at in this project, since they are willing to pony up 4.3 million, and with our fingers crossed, maybe some more to help us get this done. We just wanted to get something, if you're not familiar with the MOU, it is not a legal binding contract or anything like that. It's just an agreement or a statement in writing that you both agree on, you sign, and that you are both interested in continuing to work on this project. And I think it was very important, and I wanted to make sure that we had this in place before my term was up. And I think that it would show not only the future council coming in and into the future, but it also shows the community that this is just not some harebrained idea that the city has thought up and trying to push through and doing it on their own. This is a partnership with CDOT, and to be perfectly honest with you, without CDOT's participation in the matching funds, we wouldn't even be talking about this. So does anybody want to kind of walk through the little presentation? We include that in your packet just so you can look at and what we put together and discuss at our visioning session. And and some of you don't know or may not know of some of the stuff that we've done before you were on council and over the last several years. So with that, is there anything that Bob, you have any history stuff in this packet that you would like to talk to us about?
Oh, my goodness. I wasn't even thinking about that tonight, I'm afraid. A real quick personal note. When I was a kid here, oh, boy, this already hit the end of the meeting, huh? Already. Great. Okay. Anyway, I attended grade school in the old building here that's been long gone, the old original two-story grade school. And believe it or not, in the late 40s, the mountain goats were in town relatively thick sometimes of the year. And they intimidated not only the kids walking home from school, but even some of the adults that were walking around town. And mountain goats were really, really common, almost like raccoons at the time. And so I tell you what, this is really off the hip, but that's a personal experience. And there were times where I at least as a little kid, and these goats were taller than I was, that they really intimidated me, and I felt like they were chasing me home, and they did threaten you. I've never known of anybody that was really hit by one, but nevertheless, they were pretty big animals compared to about a third grader. So that's about all. That was really shooting from the hip.
So with, don't know who out in the public's with us tonight, but let's just walk through this. It only takes about 5 minutes. I think it's very interesting and gives us a perspective of where the city was, 6 years ago and where we are today. So, back in 1859, as everybody should know, our train out there represents it. But you're going to scroll through it. Very good. That must be John doing that. The Union Pacific Railroad came through right behind Tommyknockers. The doors that are on the back of Tommyknockers, those were where the trains were being loaded back there. So in the 50s, I-70 construction moved along Clear Creek alignment. This is when they started planning the I-70 corridor and the construction of that. Next slide, please. Back in 2015, after about 3 years of construction, CDOT completed the eastbound twin tunnels and initiates the reconstruction of westbound tunnel expansion. At that time, they had done one side and there was a plea to go ahead, since it was already mobilized, you learn from your mistakes on the first one. And with a blast, if you didn't know this, here's a little history on that. There was a blast that threw a rock over to our wastewater plant and hit some stuff over there. So that was a pretty amazing deal. Let's see, the city agreed with CDOT to do the devolution on Colorado Boulevard. I think that was kind of the start of the transformation of our community. $22 million from CDOT to help us reconstruct Colorado Boulevard, and they would make it ownership of the city. Now, with that, the city could have taken that money and done every street in Idaho Springs except Colorado Boulevard, and that would have been okay, except we would have still had Colorado Boulevard as it was 8 years ago. Idaho Springs developed concept for a new parking structure and begins coordinating with the county. This is when there was houses being talked about buying for this. And the county had been talked about getting the Jacob House to make this happen. And this is kind of where it started. Eastbound Peak Prairie Shoulder Lane constructed, included the reconstruction of 240 and 241. If the community remembers and council remembers, those two bridges were a very sore time in our community. We were told that those bridges were going to be taken out and put back up, and we're going to be able to have movement across them in about 4 months. Now, of course, that wasn't going to include all of the the aesthetics and the railings and the sidewalks and everything, but they would have had it backed up. I think that it was about 14 months before they actually opened that bridge back up at 240, and it was a very trying time in our community. 2016, CDOT initiates the westbound Peak Prairie Shoulder Lane, and including the considered a bus tank stop. Bus-Stang had been operating for well over a year, and Commissioner Mock at that time and myself really pushed on CDOT to have a Bus-Stang stop here in town. We couldn't get it, and the whole idea was they would not do it because we didn't have any local transit type endeavor going on. So it wasn't probably another 6 to 8 months that the county was able to put in some inter-county transit system, and shortly after that followed Bus-Stang stop here. And if you didn't know this, the Bus-Stang stop here is the most used on the corridor. Next slide. Let's see. 6 million pedestrian. I'm just kind of going to skim through this. We get here to where we're at 2019. Idaho Springs Institute's downtown managed parking program. I think that the try of that before we even move forward with the parking deck was actually recommended to the city when we did a TAP study. So we did that, and then, as you know, here in the recent weeks, it's been being worked on for quite some time. The property owners downtown got together, decided that they would like to bring to the city for consideration of a special improvement district. Our last regular meeting, we approved that. The pandemic in 2020, of course, introduced the outdoor marketplace, and I think this has been very successful. The business owners have taken it into their own hands to make it successful, and they've done a great job. And I will tell you that they really appreciate the city and how we've partnered with them to make this happen. We got a small grant from CDOT, Revitalizing Main Street grant. That what do we use that for? Was that what we used for our handicap ramps? Is that correct, Andy? For our handicap ramps that need to be done. So that will help for our downtown. Currently, right now, we have the downtown master plan complete. And going to be in front of us for adoption. I think it was a very good document. There wasn't any questions about it. And I think they did a very good job. And I'm hoping that future councils, I hope this is not just another study or master plan that you get and it sits on the shelf. We have been good about when we get plans and ask for things. We here have been taking them and making them happen. So I'm looking forward to that being put in play. Next slide.
Jonathan, along that line, first of all, I don't think we'll sit on the shelf at all, because I think both the city and a number of business people are very interested in pursuing this and making it happen. And one interesting thing that happened, I thought that Jonathan mentioned to me today, that now that the eastbound single lane has been opened and there's parking on both sides of the street, and only 2 businesses are partaking of their encroachment agreement, that there are some others now that wish they had not dropped it apparently. And I don't know any details or how many there is, but I was interested in hearing that. And don't need to go into any detail right now, but perhaps not all business owners are paying as much of attention as they should.
All right, thanks, Bob. So in the last 5 years, the infrastructure investment and economic growth in Idaho Springs and Bear Creek County as a whole has just been crazy. In 2002, there was a new high school, it was before my time, built up on Floyd Hill. On November 1st, in 2019, the final game from the Gold Diggers was played on this field, and the property shortly after that went under contract. With that, rezoning has been done and approved, and a FDP is, I'm sure, is currently being put together and going to be ready for public view and city review in the near future. Let's see, the managed parking, we feel from feedback from the residents and the downtown business owners that it is successful, the turnover is good, and we're protecting those residents in the neighborhoods that were being so negatively impacted by our busy weekends in the summertime, busy time all the time on the weekends and in the summertime. And it's very much appreciated by the residents. Next slide. We got the Greenway done, the trail to nowhere that is set there for our, folks that have lived in the community a lot longer than I have. The trail up behind the Forest Service had been built and stopped there, and then it didn't connect until you got across the street and down the road. So we were able to make that connection. Currently doing the continuance of that Greenway Trail down County Road 314 as still a part of Idaho Springs project and a CDOT and county project. Let's see. So we already talked about some of these things. And then, of course, the rest of the packet is how the drawings and the ideas and the vision that what we've been doing over the last couple of years to show what this transit center would look like, how it would benefit our community as Idaho Springs, how it would benefit our county, and how it would benefit our regional transportation system. So this is why we're going to continue to work on this, and I am hoping that that council is supportive of this and approves us signing this MOU with CDOT. So with that, is there any questions? Man, that was easy. All right, good work session, council. We'll have this on our last regular meeting of the year, next Monday night. So with that, does anybody have any comments or questions?
I just have one. There was also a letter attached from Linda. I can't pronounce it. Enkos. I just wanted to professionally give, just recognize that she did put a packet in concerning the SID proposal. Just out of professional courtesy, I thought that should be mentioned.
Yes,
Very well written.
Yes, thank you, Art.
You're
I
welcome.
thought that. So I guess when one to put my packet together, she stuck some of my mail that's in my mailbox at City Hall. She stuck in my packet, and I thought that letter. I didn't know that was part of our packet. I thought that was a letter that was actually put in my box that was sent over to City Hall. I didn't know it was part of our packet. I saw it, but I thought I didn't know it was part of the packet.
It wasn't really for this packet, but unfortunately, her email for last council got stuck in spam. I thought she was a spammer, so I did not get it until too late for comment. So I promised her that I would make sure that I got that letter to everybody on council. So that's why it was in everybody's packet. So all of council can see what she wanted to let you guys know.
All right, thanks, Wanda.
You're welcome.
Okay, with that, I think that's all we have for tonight. Good meeting. Have a great rest of your evening and rest of your week.